Shalom. This is Hakam ben-Emmett again with another exciting edition of the Torah Watchman Show International LLC. Hope everyone's well. I have a topic of interest video. When I did a Torah Parsha, probably last year sometime, pretty much a last Passover, and we're coming close to the month of Nisan and Pesach very soon. And I did some research and I announced it to other people. They did not know that the month of Nisan was actually the first month, the head of all months, the first and beginning of the Jewish New Year. Now, the topic of this video is essentially the rabbis changed the Torah's New Year that God gave the Moshe, mandated commandment. It is written, not opinionated. Change it from the first day of the month of Nisan, as the Rabbinates call the first month, to essentially Rosh Hashanah, which is not celebrated until the month of Tishrei, which is between September and October, generally, depending on the leap year or whatever. So I thought this was very interesting. I'll be short and sweet. First of all, foremost, what is the opinion of Yehovah? Our precious, beautiful God, Yehovah. Beautiful name. Why not say it? Say it with respect. Say it with trembling knees. Say it with fear, trembling fear. But say it like you would say Tati. Say it like you would say Father. Abba, my King. Let every day be Yom Kippur. What it says very clearly in the Torah: be careful to observe only that which I enjoin upon you, neither add to it, to the Torah, nor take it away. So thou shalt not add or subtract anything from the 5 books of the Torah. You may say, wait a minute, well, what about progressive revelation? What if, didn't the prophets add or subtract things to the Torah, the Navi? Absolutely not. If something is created perfect, why reinvent the wheel? All the prophets did, and those future generations, Lador Vador, in time, since Moshe passed away, say the prophet Daniel, the prophet Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and others, what they did is espouse what God gave to Moshe in the 5 books of Torah to that new generation of people, which was unique because their circumstances were unique and that future date and time. But coming back to this, in Hebrew, it literally says,
Tishar lakim rek et asher ani madzava alek il tosev alav il taser memnu.
Again, careful to observe only what I have enjoined you to learn. Moses said this because God said it to Moses. Moses seldom did anything actionable, significant, as far as teaching and instructing the holy laws and covenantal promises of God, unless God gave him a task to do those things direct. Now, what do rabbinates, what is Orthodox Judaism, what do they believe about what I just said? Okay, this is their excuse. This is word for word, not my words. Now, rabbis do not actually change the written text of the Torah. Remember, when you hear the word, it is written, it means you're talking about verbatim divine instruction of God and Moshe, the 5 books of the Torah, and everything that's espoused throughout the Tanakh, versus the oral Torah, which is opinionated, subjective, and it's added and subtracted on. But wait a minute. I want to be nice to rabbinates, and I'm going to read what they wrote about this because I asked a question. So they don't change anything that's written in the Torah. Why? As it's considered divinely revealed, and therefore it cannot be altered. However, instead, rabbinates interpret the Torah through a process called oral law, which allows them to apply to it principles to different situations and contemporary life, contemporary versus 2,500 years ago, effectively creating a fence around the Torah's rules to ensure strict adherence, even if it means adding additional restrictions not explicitly stated in the text, the Sidra, the Torah. So they admitted to it, and it's called fencing. Another word for fencing is Jewish law or halakha. I've said this before. Moshe had one version, the master version, divinely inspired version of halakha and Jewish law. And then you have the rabbinates that were man-made. Their ideas, their opinions, their innovation became the oral Torah became their Jewish code, their best practice per se. And if you talk to most rabbinates, they'll say, well, the Talmud and the Torah are the same. You cannot understand the Torah without the Tanakh. And I asked him, why do you say that? Well, how will you know how to pronounce the Hebrew in the Torah and the Kamash or the Torah scroll when you unroll it and unveil it every Shabbat? How would you understand it without the effective use of Masoretic text? And then you had to think about this because I have many Talmud tractates at the Shulchan Aruch in my library. Okay? I have these books. And the original language in these tractates, in the Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem or Palestinian Talmud, the main one is the Babylonian Talmud, was written in Aramaic, not Hebrew. Aramaic did not have all these Masoretic texts, vowels, soundings, and strophes for singing. Just didn't. But I thought that was interesting. Now, wrap this up. Let's talk about the Jewish New Year. According to Mishnah Torah, rabbinates, Mishnah Torah means essentially like Davarim. It's a synopsis of the first 4 books of the Torah. And the Mishnah Torah is essentially a summary of everything that Moses said in the 5 books. The 2 biggest ones was done by Ramban, Maimonides, and Rashi. These 2 big rabbinical figures of the Middle Ages, essentially around the 11th century, so going up to 12th century. So the Mishnah Torah, so they have expositions there. They came up with this, not 1 new year, but 4. 4 different New Years are observed. Rosh Hashanah, which everyone knows is the first of in Tishrei, okay? The first day of the month of Tishrei is the first day of the Rabbinical Jewish New Year. And if this year is 5785, so when the first of Tishrei, that Hebrew month comes due, it will be 5786, okay? And all of Israel celebrates this. Jewish tradition celebrates, as far as I know, most Karaite Jews celebrate this as well. But continuing on, the first of Nisan, they admit, was when the Exodus began. So that was a big trigger. The children of Israel leaving Goshen, Egypt, after defeating the Egyptian army through the 10 plagues. So they admit that that's another New Year holiday. Now, the first of the month of Elul, and remember, Tu BiShvat, the 15th of Shevat, you essentially have a month of animals and a month of trees, and these were 2 years. So again, you have the month of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, which most every single Jew on the planet keeps as a high holiday. Then you have the smaller relegated month that God mandated to Moshe, the month of Nisan, the first day there. And then you have the third one is Elul and Tu BiShvat. Each one delineates the beginning of a year for different legal and ecclesiastical purposes. That's a nice word, right? So according to the Bible, the new year begins in the month of Nisan. You can read it in the book of Exodus, okay? Shemot. which is in the spring. Now, Nisan is the first month of the Jewish calendar according to the laws of Moshe, the very first and only halakha that Karaite Jews worship verbatim. An explanation on why this is actually the head of all months, the Rosh Hashanah that should have been kept, the Rabbinates ignored and created 3 other variants of that. Now, Elohim, or God, told Moshe that Nisan would be for the first month of the year, just before Exodus from Egypt. Exodus literally means to egress, to leave. The first day of Nisan is the start of that year. So if you were marking something on your calendar, or if you had a stopwatch and you were first time you ever were telling time, paying attention to a solar eclipse, paying attention to the various phases of the moon, new moon, and things like that. You know, the first of Nisan was actually the very first Rosh Chodesh, like we say Rosh Chodesh, and that celebration for the first of every month. But Nisan was almost like the beginning of a new life, like the creation of the universe kind of thing. This is when all the other festivals and cycles started spinning up and started going and moving. How would you know how to tell time or when the events would occur? Spring, summer, fall, winter. How would you know? So now there's 3 of 7 festivals that fall in Nisan, including Pesach, the unleavened bread, and first fruits. Remember, we start first counting Omer, I believe, between the first and second day of Pesach. Karaite Jews start counting Omer when you actually have some evidence of a crop. When wheat, for instance, or barley has matured enough to see grains of that wheat kernel inside of a shaft, because an Omer is a measurement you take to market. Now, rabbinates have a very structured, strict guidance for when you count Omer. In fact, you could download the app on your smartphone from Chabad, and you can actually be honest and go in there. It has a prayer there, a brocha. You mark off how many days you've counted for Omer, even though there's snow in the fields, or there's drought, and there's no evidence of any grain or barley in the field to take to market to measure even an Omer. Exodus chapter 12, verse 2 is what we're focusing on. Indicates that Elohim numbered the months based on when Israel was released from captivity in Egypt. So in other words, in time of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, no one was really counting months. They were paying attention to seasons, changes in temperature, when the rain was more abundant versus scarce, like in the summer, compared to the winter when you had more abundant rain, when the leaves fell in the fall in the due time. Migratory birds, of course, I'm sure they paid attention to the zodiac, the movement of the planets, things of this nature, astronomical things. But the first time ever did the Hebrew people in Goshen, Egypt start paying attention. Hey, this is a big month for us that we'll never forget, the month of Nisan. I'm just giving it a name, but it's actually month number 1 was the most important month of the entire year, because it was the year of our freedom from Egyptian slavery. The month of Nisan was originally called Abib, which I did not know it had another name, which was roughly March or April timeframe, because depending on the leap year, it may vary a little bit, but it's always in the spring. Like I said, like in Maryland, the United States, where I live, we're having a very weird spring. It's not warming up as it should. Flowers are not blooming. Trees are not budding because we had freezing temperatures last night, and some things change. If it's colder than normal in Jerusalem, then and in the Negev and other areas where you grow things, it may not come to market. So again, while in Babylonian captivity, Jews borrowed month names from the Babylonian calendar. What did the pagan, ritualistic, polytheistic nation of Babylon, what do you think they were naming their months after if it wasn't from idols, the polytheistic faith? The month of Tammuz is the month that we associate with the summer and all the bad negative choices. And supposedly Moshe died in the month of Tammuz, and A lot of people don't get married because of bad luck and taboo and evil eye and all this. Well, they gleefully took all the names that Babylonia was using for their calendar system and reconstituted and adopted and made it their own, keeping the names of those gods when it's absolutely forbidden. Forbidden. In fact, capital punishment if for a Jew to bow their knee to any heathen god, pagan idol, and God says very clear, don't you even say the name of those gods. It's just me. That's what God said. The month of Nisan is celebrated as the children of Israel being released from bitter bondage to the Egyptians. The celebration included in the spring festivals, like I said before, Passover, unleavened bread. The Feast of First Fruits, or Yom HaBakurim in Hebrew, is a biblical festival celebrated during the week of Pesach, acknowledging God's provision and the first harvest of the year. So I thought you might find this video interesting. I hope it's thought-provoking. Listen, this is not something I invented. It's not something Judaism invented or incorporated. It's simply the laws of Moshe that we trust and put our faith in, and nothing else. Why do we need anything else? Do we need to duplicate in a laboratory the creation event that God did so well and he said it was good and perfect? When he created Adam and Hava, didn't he say it was perfect? Why do you think God told Moshe to tell the children of Israel? They may want to have adapted it. Hey, we have an evolved sense of sensibilities now, or nuances, how we want to get along with a going nation. We could change things up a little bit. It's okay to bring that beautiful golden figurine I bought at the auction and bring it home and share it with my family, just set it up on a coffee table. We just make these 50 shades of gray compromises. Unfortunately, in Rabbinical Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, that's been around for a little more than 100 years by name, believe it or not, Karaite Judaism has been around since at least the 9th century, maybe the 8th century, maybe even before we find out more and more information. So listen, I implore to you, I'm trying to teach you something that is true, that's Emmett truthful. Read the Torah, read Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. Know when the true Rosh Hashanah, new month, the head of all months, it says it right there by the Lord my God. It says it there. Why do Carthage Jews keep something that's so sacred to them, that's by the word in the mouth of God, versus a man-made thing like oral Torah? Oral Torah does not occur anywhere in the Tanakh and the Torah. It's not there. There's nothing said, thou shalt obey the oral Torah. He said the 613 mitzvot is that you would be blessed and cursed based on these things. 613 laws is a lot of laws to keep, and we can't keep a lot of them because most of the Jews live in a diaspora today. Like I live in a diaspora here in America. Why do rabbinates decide to alter, to subtract and add their flavor, their choice? Who gave them authority? They claim that they have the authority from the Torah because the 70 judges, you hear about the 71 members of the Sanhedrin. Listen, rabbi means as teacher of the Torah scholar maybe, but never a judge. Only God appoints judges. Man can appoint judges, but man is not God. But they decided to do this. To tell you the truth, and I'll close with this. In the Middle Ages, very few rabbis had any reason to hope that the Jews would return to Palestine or Eretz Israel to rebuild our nation there. In fact, if anything, Rashi strongly discouraged any rabbi or any Jew from even thinking about that. Why? Because Rashi decided in Or Torah, get this, that we are not allowed to invade our own native land and take it back from the Canaanites, from the Amalekites, and from the Hebrides and the pagans there. That's what he said. In other words, that land would be there until that day the Mashiach reveals himself. Unfortunately, this mentality is still persistent in the 21st century. And unfortunately, it led to millions of Jews needlessly being murdered in the diaspora of Europe and Poland and Lithuania and Germany. All these countries, they were murdered there. They were murdered there because they refused to leave where they were, their shelters, their arrows, the cemeteries where their ancestors were buried. Rabbis told them, wait on the Mashiach, wait on the Mashiach, don't arm yourself, give in. And 6 million people were murdered. 600,000 children were murdered. But many Jews survived from that. Many Karaite Jews survived by living in Krem, and living in even Australia, the Philippines, Indonesia, other places, Africa. They left, they went. But imagine if 6 million Jews marched upon Palestine at that time, Syria, Philistine, and with arms and everything else. I mean, why did it take it to 1948 for us to even have a defensive force? There's something to think about. I don't have all the answers. I pray for wisdom and intuitive insight, but sometimes I hit the mark right on the head. I sometimes get it right, sometimes I make a mistake. If you think I'm wrong about this, please challenge me. But based on my research, a lot of this is not my opinion. It really is not. I'm just regurgitating what other people have said based on their research. Okay? That makes me wise to admit that I don't have all the knowledge, but many people together have more knowledge than I have. Take care and God bless. Hakam Yah ben-Emmett signing out. Until the next time. Shalom Aleichem.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.